Imagine pitching this to a room full of investors. You want people to invite total strangers, not friends, not family, complete strangers, into their homes to sleep on an air mattress on the floor, and you want them to pay for it. Then you turn to the strangers and say, "Trust us, the person whose floor you're sleeping on is perfectly safe." Almost everyone who heard this idea said the exact same thing. No, it will never work. It's unsafe, it's strange, nobody wants it. For years, the people behind this idea were broke, buried in debt, and laughed out of meeting after meeting. And at their lowest point, the only thing keeping their company breathing was a stack of novelty breakfast cereal. I'm not exaggerating, cereal! And yet that same company, the one nobody believed in, is worth around $80 billion today, and you have almost certainly used it. So buckle in. This might be one of the strangest survival stories in the history of business. Two broke dreamers, a near death, a second near death, and a save so small that almost nobody tells you the real version. Let's decode it.
Our story begins in 2007 in San Francisco, one of the most expensive cities on Earth. Two friends, both fresh out of art school, were sharing an apartment and couldn't make rent. They were designers, not businessmen, long on talent, painfully short on cash. Then they noticed something. A huge design conference was coming to the city, and every single hotel had sold out. Hundreds of travellers were stuck with nowhere to stay. And these two had an empty living room. So they did something slightly ridiculous. They bought a few air mattresses, threw them on the floor, and offered visitors a place to crash, with a home-cooked breakfast in the morning. 3 guests actually showed up and paid. A man in his 30s, a woman from across the country, and a father of 4. Strangers sleeping on their floor, happy to be there. And in that strange little weekend, the two friends felt it. This wasn't just a way to make rent. This could be enormous. A way for anyone, anywhere, to turn an empty room into income and a stranger into a guest. There was just one problem. Nobody else could see it.
To build a real company, they needed money. So they went looking for investors. And they were rejected again and again. The idea sounded insane to almost everyone in the room. Strangers? In your home? On an air mattress? They pitched and heard no. They tweaked it and heard no. One after another, the people who controlled the money waved them off. To show you just how badly the experts misjudged this, a handful of investors turned down a 10% slice of the company for about $1.5 million. That very same slice would later be worth somewhere around $4.7 billion. They said no to billions. Meanwhile, the founders were sinking. Out came the credit cards. The debt climbed, around $40,000 of it, just to keep the lights on. They were so broke they were eating cheap cereal for dinner. A third partner joined to build the technology, and still the money bled out faster than it came in. They had a working idea, real guests, genuine demand, and they were quietly going broke. Because having a great idea and staying alive are two completely different things.
So, backs against the wall, they did something no business school would ever teach. It was 2008, and a US presidential election had swallowed the entire country. Every conversation, every screen, every headline. So these two broke designers looked at that tidal wave of attention and decided to ride it. With breakfast cereal. They designed novelty cereal boxes themed around the two candidates. Limited edition. Just 500 boxes of each, folded by hand on their kitchen table. And here's the audacious part. They didn't price them like cereal. They sold each box for $40. $40 for cereal that cost a few cents to fill. It should have been a punchline. Instead, it became a sensation. Collectors wanted them, the press couldn't resist the story. One flavour sold out completely, and when they couldn't shift the rest of the other, they ate it themselves, for dinner, for weeks. When the dust settled,
Those silly cereal boxes had brought in around $30,000. Enough, barely, to keep the dream alive. It felt like the miracle that saved them. It wasn't. Not even close.
That cereal did do one thing they never expected. It got them noticed by one of the most legendary startup schools in the world, a place that takes tiny, unproven companies and tries to turn them into giants. But it wasn't their business that impressed the school's famous founder. It was the cereal. His logic was simple and brilliant. If these two could convince people to pay $40 for a $4 box of cereal, then maybe, just maybe, they could convince strangers to sleep in strangers' homes. So they were in. A small check, a desk, 3 months to prove themselves. And then, nothing. Week after week, the numbers barely moved. The company was frozen at around $200 a week, a flat, lifeless line on the chart. And here is the brutal law of their world. No investor on Earth funds a flat line. The cereal money was nearly gone. The clock was ticking down. They had taken their best shot, clawed their way into the room every founder dreams of, and they were still, slowly, dying. By every rational measure on Earth, this is exactly where the story quietly ends. It didn't. Those two broke designers were Brian Chesky and Joe Gebbia. Their technical co-founder, Nathan Blecharczyk. The legendary school was Y Combinator. Its founder, Paul Graham. The two silly cereals even had names, Obama O's and Cap'n McCain's. And the company flatlining at $200 a week? It was Airbnb. Yes, Airbnb. The app you've almost certainly used to book a trip, the company now living inside tens of millions of homes around the world. Once it was a flat line and a nearly empty bank account away from vanishing forever. But here's the part the famous cereal legend always leaves out, and it's the most important part of the whole story. The cereal did not save Airbnb. It was a clever stunt that bought a little time and nothing more. What actually saved this company was almost embarrassingly small. Staring at that flat line, Paul Graham asked them one simple question. Where do your customers actually live? New York, they said. Then what on earth are you doing here in California? He asked. Go to them. So they flew across the country, knocked on real doors, and finally saw the true problem with their own eyes. The photos. The listings on the site looked awful. Dark, blurry, crooked phone snapshots of rooms nobody in their right mind would book. So the founders did something that doesn't scale at all, something a tech company is never supposed to do. They borrowed a good camera, went door to door, and reshot every apartment by hand, turning each grimy little room into something warm, bright, and inviting. And within one single week, revenue doubled. The product hadn't changed at all, only the pictures had. That was the real magic move, not the cereal, the camera. From that moment, the flywheel finally caught. Better photos meant more bookings meant more hosts meant more places to stay, which pulled in even more guests. Growth hit 30% every single week. The very investors who ignored them suddenly returned their calls. They raised $600,000 from Sequoia Capital, one of the most respected names in all of venture capital. The company that had survived on novelty cereal was at last truly alive. And then it didn't just grow, it detonated.
What came next is one of the great climbs in modern business. They named it Airbnb, and it spread city by city, country by country, until it had wrapped around the entire planet. Then, in December 2020, in the middle of a pandemic that should have flattened any travel company, Airbnb went public. The market valued it at tens of billions of dollars practically overnight. And today, the numbers are staggering. Airbnb brings in over $12 billion in revenue a year. It lists more than 8 million homes run by over 5 million hosts across more than 220 countries and regions.
In a single recent year, guests booked more than 500 million nights and experiences on the platform. Since those first 3 air mattresses, it has welcomed over 2 billion guest arrivals. But it does not rule alone. It's locked in a war with giants. Its larger rival, Booking Holdings, the parent of Booking.com, is worth even more. Expedia and its VRBO brand chase the same travellers, and the entire global hotel industry it once terrified is fighting to win them back. The tiny company that nearly died on a flat line now sits dead centre in a battle over how the whole world travels.
So the next time you open that app to book a place to stay, remember what it almost cost. Remember that the company now worth around $80 billion was once 2 broke designers eating unsold cereal for dinner, $40,000 in debt, staring at a dead flat line, a breath away from the end. Remember that the move everyone celebrates, the famous cereal stunt, was never the thing that actually saved them. The thing that saved them was small, unglamorous, and almost invisible. They got on a plane, knocked on doors, and fixed the photos. The designer who once maxed out his credit cards to make rent now runs one of the most valuable companies on earth, and the investors who said no walked away from billions. The lesson was never go sell cereal. It's this. When you're out of money and out of options, you do whatever it takes to buy one more week. And then you spend that week obsessing over the tiny, boring detail that everyone else is too proud to touch. Because the bottom is not where stories end. It's where they find out who you really are. That's the money behind the magic. This is Dollars Decoded. We'll see you in the next one.